This is Goals with Soul, the podcast for visionary coaches and entrepreneurs, building your business with inspired action. In alignment with your mission and authentic message, so you can create impact for your soul clients and feel lit up every day. I'm your host, Jo Ingram, married mum of 3 daughters from London and a former ad agency director turned business coach and strategist. In Goals with Soul, we blend revenue generation with energetics, marketing strategies with pranic healing, and ambitious business goals with our soul's desires. If you're looking to build your business with less efforting and more ease, this is the podcast for you. Let's dive in. Welcome to Goals with Soul. I'm Joanna Ingram, and today we're diving into the critical topic of sleep. So often as mums, business owners, humans, women, we just don't get the opportunity to really optimize our sleep, so we're able to perform the best that we can during the day. And as I talk about in this interview coming up, it's so easy to sit down at 10 o'clock at night and completely chill and say, this is the first time I've sat down all day, let alone if you're still at your desk. But if you're like me, this is time where you just get to spend it just for myself. I think about the Jennifer Aniston L'Oreal advert, because I'm worth it. And too frequently we're self-sabotaging ourselves and decreasing our performance during the day and our enjoyment of our businesses because we're sleep deprived and because we're not getting the best quality of sleep that we can possibly get. And that's why I'm excited to dive into this topic today. With my guest, Dr. Catherine Darley, she's an expert in natural sleep medicine. She's treated patients over 20 years and teaches sleep skills that people need to thrive. We dive into why it is we're not getting the best sleep we can, the impact of it, and importantly, what we can do immediately to start improving the quality of our sleep and therefore our performance during the day. Let's dive in. Catherine, welcome to Goals with Soul.
Great. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
And it's such an important topic, not least because I had a terrible night's sleep last night. In fact, the last couple of nights, I slept really, really poorly. And I realized that today, speaking with a sleep expert, and particularly how it can impact our businesses and our relationships, is so critical to everything we do. Like, I was just saying to my husband about an hour ago, I feel really spacey today. And I was like, I'm so happy that I'm in conversation. Like, just before we tuned in, we were saying, what's your peak time? And you were like, well, 2 p.m., which it is here in London, is great. And I know it's like super early where you are, like 6:30 a.m. And I was like, well, actually, 2 o'clock isn't my peak time, but it's a great time to have a conversation, because that's something that, even though I feel sleep deprived, I can absolutely dive into. So, Catherine, please do introduce your topic and tell us a little bit about how you got involved with the area of sleep.
Yeah, I am so passionate about sleep. I was thinking the other day, there's the hours that I sleep, somewhere between 8 and 9, and then there's the hours that I think about sleep, which is probably another 8 or 9 or 10 hours a day. And so I spend a lot of my time on sleep. I'm a naturopathic doctor in the US, and I focus exclusively on sleep, and I have since I was in college. In college, I got very interested in the topic and did some independent research studies. At the time in my town, there was only 3 high schools, and one of them was going through major renovation. So they were down to 2 high schools, and that was just not enough space for the number of students. So they were doing this natural experiment where they had one population go to school the regular hours, which was about 7:30 in the morning to 2:30 in the afternoon. And then they had a whole nother cohort use the same building from 3 p.m. until 9. And that actually is much better aligned for teenagers' sleep. And so I did this little student project looking at the sleep of these 2 different high school populations. And that got me into the world of sleep. I worked at a research lab. I did the overnight sleep studies at a clinic. And then I went to medical school with the intention of looking at sleep and treating sleep from a natural sleep medicine standpoint.
Oh my goodness, there are 2 things that really stood out for me in what you just said. The first about teenagers. So I'm the mum of 13-year-old twin girls. I also have a 20-year-old daughter. And my goodness, they can sleep for Britain, as we would say here. And it's like they're so not ready to get started at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I just like want to say that was a genius move on the part of that high school. And I wish more high schools in the UK would trial something like that, because 9 p.m. they don't want to go to bed. They're just like on it. They're full of energy, and getting them off to bed to say to them, you've got to get up early in the morning, never really works. But also, I just want to say, did you just say you sleep 8 to 9 hours a night?
I did say that. Yeah, 8 1/4 is my sweet spot.
Now, I don't know if anyone's listening that's like with me on this one, like, what? Eight hours would be like a complete dream for me. And I went through years of my life probably sleeping 5.5 to 6 hours, knowing that that really wasn't enough. And even now, if I hit 7, I'm overjoyed. And I don't have an effective way of hitting 7 hours a night. And anyone listening who is kind of thinking, yeah, same here. We often come from corporate backgrounds, highly driven, overthinkers, over efforters, perfectionists, maybe people pleasers, and our mind is constantly whirring. And that idea of settling in to sleep for that number of hours is so alien, perhaps something we've never done in our entire adult lives. And I'd love to dive in today on like how you get to a point that that's realistic. But first, like, have you always slept that number of hours, or is it something that you've perfected through your education and your understanding of sleep?
I pretty much have always slept that amount of hours. I've had a few times in college where I was working full time and going to college, and that really made it difficult. And certainly, I've also had times when I was doing shift work, staying up all night watching other people sleep, which is pretty torturous. But outside of those times, I get enough sleep. One of the things that I just love, Joanna, is our kind of global discussion about boundaries and people acknowledging and setting their boundaries of what works for them and what doesn't work for them. And I think it's a great place to apply that is around our sleep, that getting enough sleep is like having enough food or water during the day. Like we need that. And to set the boundaries that I'm going to get the sleep that I need, and I'll do the best I can with my day and my effort. And like you were saying, we are people who want to make a difference in the world. We have a lot of responsibilities, both at home and in the workplace. That's great. But giving your all those 15 or 16 hours that are left when you've gotten enough sleep is very realistic.
That's so, so true. And it's curious, isn't it? Why, of all the aspects of health, quite often sleep is deprioritized. I have so many conversations with friends, clients, people in my network, and we talk about self care all the time. And we're in a spiritual space. So we might talk about grounding, about meditation. We might talk about breath work, and I myself facilitate breathwork sessions. We might talk about running, yoga, and exercise. We certainly talk about how we can improve our diets. And sleep kind of takes a very back seat in a lot of those conversations. We'll say like, oh yeah, I should sleep better. But very rarely do we take the actions to make that happen. And I'm curious, obviously, you must have worked with so many people on improving sleep. What is it that means they deprioritize it? Why are they so frequently not looking at sleep as the primary answer to some of the challenges they're having during the day?
I think it really is a social construct, the idea that you may have heard this phrase, I'll sleep when I'm dead, right? People often will tell me that when I'm out at a social occasion and we're talking about what our work is. And what flashes through my mind when people say that is that it's likely that they'll die sooner with short sleep. And we know that people who sleep the shorter do have shorter lifespans. I think, yeah, for whatever reason, it has been very kind of shoved in the corner as a foundation of health. And that's why I'm loving to have these conversations on podcasts such as yours, is to raise awareness that we really do need sleep. And why would we deny ourselves sleep when we wouldn't deny ourselves some of those other essential health foundations. We're not going to say, oh, I need 8 glasses of water, but I'm only going to get 6 on a constant basis. That just doesn't make any sense. And same with sleep. That said, we do have, of course, a lot of responsibilities that can pressure us to shrink our sleep time. The thing is, it's kind of a misnomer or a misunderstanding that the more I'm awake, the longer I'm awake, the more I'm going to get done. That actually doesn't play out. People just become less and less effective with their work the longer they're at it.
Yeah. And, it strikes me as you're speaking, thinking about my own experiences about sleep over the years and the different decades of life. And I think for some reason, lack of sleep's become a bit of a badge of honor, or it is, or at least it was in the past. In your 20s, like you said, I'll sleep when I'm dead. It's work hard, play hard. And then, as you move into motherhood, sleep deprivation is just a natural byproduct of having young children and being busy. And then as you move into midlife, you kind of got into a bit of a habit. And I'm thinking to myself, well, what is it in your 40s and beyond? That is my personal experience. And I think about it in terms of the fact that actually it becomes a self-sabotage lever that you're able to go, you know what? I've worked hard all day and I've dealt with the kids and I've done all the things. Sometimes around 10 p.m., you sit down for the first time in peace and quiet to watch a bit of Netflix or just scroll on social media. And before you know it, it's hitting midnight and you kind of told yourself, I deserve it. Which is, of course, the complete opposite to what we really deserve, which, of course, is a great night's sleep and all the benefits that I want to drill you about in just a moment. And it's like, instead of doing what really nourishes us, we're kind of taking the sort of self-sabotage sweet spot and saying, this is my time. This is like, I don't know if anyone listening is like, yeah, me too, because this is my personal experience, but I know I can't be the only one. And sometimes the only time we get to ourselves is that sort of 10 till midnight or beyond. And instead of like winding down and getting into sleep, we're actually, looking at screens and becoming more stimulated. And I know that that's not the right move. So like, is that something you see frequently? Am I the only one? Or like, what are we really doing to ourselves when we're saying, I deserve it?
I think that is such a spot on comment, Joanna, because I do see that. And there's even a term for that. It's called bedtime procrastination. And it is that sense that we deserve to have some downtime. And I agree, everybody deserves to have some downtime. Um, one of the misconceptions that happens or the shifts in people's awareness and perception that happens with sleep deprivation is that after the third night of being sleep deprived, your sense of how impaired you are adjusts to that new normal of your performance. So even though after the first night, after the second night, after the third night of sleep deprivation, your performance continues to decline, you realize it after that first night, you realize it after that second night, but somehow our perception shifts after 3 nights and we go, oh, I'm not so impaired. I can handle this. I can do just fine on 6 hours. The testing of our performance will show that's not true, but our awareness really shifts. So, a person needs to get beyond a certain number of nights of being really, really well rested to kind of regain, oh, this is what my natural well rested performance level is, much higher than I thought.
Yeah, and let's talk about performance. Now, almost without exception, everyone tuning in here is running their own business. We're coaches, consultants, experts, healers. And I think that we get into a state where we want to perform really, really highly because we have so much to do. Sometimes we describe it as doing all the things. Running your own business isn't an easy task. And one of the reflections I have that I see the difference between when I was working in corporate and running my own business is the level of self-motivation that's required to do the things that we must do to have successful businesses, from marketing ourselves with confidence and doing that completely proactively, to obviously showing up with excellence for our clients and doing all of the other things in between. Can be managing teams, getting through our admin, and so on. So when we're trying to operate at that level of performance, what is the main sort of setbacks that we may not even know, to your point earlier, about that we're experiencing solely because of our either lack of sleep or perhaps bad quality of sleep?
Yeah. So I think about the spillover of inadequate sleep, the ripple effects in 5 domains: our physical health and mental health, physical performance, cognitive performance, and then emotional intelligence. So let's talk about those areas that are really relevant as small business owners. And I'm a small business owner myself, so I understand what you're saying and people's experience from that point of view. The cognitive piece that small business owners really rely on is being creative problem solvers and having flexible thinking, right? That so many times, either in your business affairs or with your clients, they are relying on you to come up with a brilliant idea. And your ability to come up with a brilliant idea when you are not well rested is significantly impaired. And there's lots of pieces of coming up with a brilliant idea: having the knowledge, being able to understand the issues in your field, right? That is going to be impaired. There is the need to have simple memory, right? Where did I find that idea? Where did I find that resource? Those simple memory tasks are also impaired, and it all feeds into your ability to be brilliant as you need to be in your business and really have those insightful aha breakthroughs with either your clients or structuring your business. And then the other piece that I think doesn't get enough attention that I'd like to shine a light on is that our sleep impacts our relationships. And, when someone's sleep deprived, they walk into the office, they can't tell if their team member is happy or angry. And there's so many times we walk into a situation and in the first split second, glancing at someone, we should be getting some information from their facial expression, from their body language, from the energy in the room. And if we are consistently sleep deprived, we're consistently missing that signal. And if we're missing that signal, we may not be responding appropriately to that person. If you walk into the office and your administrator looks angry, you probably should respond differently to them than at a time that they look happy.
Now that's something that like you said, the light isn't often shined on that. And I'm thinking about, obviously we spend a lot of time on Zoom and we show up with our clients. And I guess we have to be even more attuned to the subtleties that we're seeing, because we haven't always got the advantage of body language and the other sort of signals that we might see if we were in person with somebody. And like, how is it, I'm curious, that sleep deprivation means that we don't have that higher level of emotional intuition about how other people are feeling?
Well, sleep deprivation is going to change your brain function, and that is part of our brain function, is having that emotional intelligence, basically. And one of the other things that feeds into this is that when we're sleep deprived, we're much more self-centered in our moral reasoning, rather than trying to be fair. We are much more likely to make decisions that advantage just us and don't regard the other people's needs. And that's not a successful formula, I think, for a good leader, a motivational leader. And then, there's also, I mentioned the physical health. If you're sleep deprived, it increases inflammation in your body and it shows in your face. So when they take photos of people when they're well rested, and then the same people when they're sleep deprived, and show the photos to others. When they're well rested, they'll be considered healthier and more attractive, and more intelligent. And the same person when they're sleep deprived will be less so. And that's going to relate to how much you can motivate, move your team.
How interesting. And of course, we're doing this interview on Zoom, and now I'm staring at my own face, right? having revealed that I'd had a couple of bad nights sleep. Now I'm like, am I less attractive? I'm less motivating and inspiring. But these signals are so subtle that I guess we perceive them like almost imperceptibly, but our subconscious brain picks up on whether we feel someone looks happy, healthy, vibrant. And I can completely understand how sleep can affect that. And as a woman, I mean, I have to dive into this because, I'm starting to think now how I look as a result of sleep. But as a midlife woman, it seems to me in my conversations with all my midlife women friends and acquaintances, it's like it seems to be an epidemic of sleep deprivation. We're going through perimenopause and into menopause. Is that something that crops up frequently? And if so, why? Why is it at this time in our lives we seem to struggle with sleep more so than perhaps we did in the earlier years?
So that's a great question. There's an increase in actual sleep disorders among women as we age. And I'm glad you bring this up, because I want to do a little PSA that concerns like disorders like obstructive sleep apnea, restless leg syndrome, those increase in women, particularly in that menopause transition and beyond. So, obstructive sleep apnea at times in the past has been perceived as more of a man's disease or overweight men, but really it can affect women at the same rate, the same prevalence in women after menopause. And so that's something to take seriously. And then restless leg syndrome affects over 52% of the women who are postmenopausal, and that can disturb sleep. So there's not only the sleep deprivation, which is just not getting enough hours of sleep, but there's also an increase in sleep disorders. And some of that increase is due to the hormonal changes that we experience.
Yeah, and let's just talk about that just for a minute. I feel like I'm in a therapy session. I just can't help but share. But being authentic, being like really, really honest, I think it's important because sometimes we don't have important conversations, particularly, through perimenopause. And I love real heart-to-heart female conversations. And one thing I noticed as I'm going through perimenopause is an increase in anxiety. And that alone, thank goodness I'm not experiencing that, even hot flushes or restless leg, but it's like the anxiety. I found myself waking up really early, far earlier than I needed to, with things on my mind, buzzing and worrying and catastrophizing in a way. Okay, I'm going to be deeply honest here. I've always been somebody that has worried a lot about a lot of things. I think that that's one thing about being an overthinker. But in the transition, in the perimenopause, I noticed it interrupting my sleep in the morning and kind of coming awake and my mind buzzing. And is that something that's kind of common? Is there a way to stop those sorts of thoughts and get better sleep?
Yeah, I love for people to do a brain dump type journaling an hour or two before bedtime, with the intention that you're going to process your thoughts enough on paper and leave them there. And this is a skill to first identify what kinds of thoughts do I need to address, and then to implement limit setting or thought stopping in the night, and have some kind of phrase, Joanna, that just really hits your heart and is true for you, where you say something like, I already thought about that. Now's my time to sleep. I will think about it in the morning, or I can think about it when I get up. But that is a skill, and it's a great practice for people to do, because the idea that we can constantly be on and take care of our responsibilities is just not accurate, and it doesn't serve us to have that. We all deserve rest. we all deserve rest. And that means even rest from our thoughts and our mind. And just, I do have concerns about how you mentioned that often it's 10 p.m. before women, moms have a chance to sit down undisturbed and just be. Um, we all need that time, ideally sooner than 10 p.m. though.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me think of what my grandma always used to say. She always said an hour before midnight's worth 2 hours after midnight. And that was her entire thesis on sleep. And it seems like some of that kind of maybe ancient wisdom has been so lost in modern society. You know, the fact that it's 10 p.m. before we get downtime to ourselves. And it's already been dark. I mean, it's winter right here. I'm in London. I imagine you're in somewhere a little bit warmer in Pacific time, right?
Northwest corner of the US, and it's pretty cold. It was freezing and snowing here yesterday. I would love to talk about that, Joanna, because um, the thing that, pardon me, the thing that really impacts our sleep that I think people have probably heard about, but they don't maybe know exactly how impactful it is this light at night, this artificial light at night. If you think about the human experience, and even for your grandmother, um, when it got dark outside, it was darker inside. People may have had a fire or candlelight, or your grandma had some incandescent lights, but she didn't have these bright LED full spectrum lights that are providing blue light. And in that natural light environment, what happens is as the sun goes down, our melatonin, which is this hormone of darkness that helps us feel sleepy, it would start to rise. And so before people got into bed, their melatonin was elevated and they would more easily fall asleep. Now we're suppressing it with the bright light until we turn out the lights. And so I think the biggest, most impactful thing a person can do is 3 hours before bed, or 2 or 1, whatever is you can achieve that's better than what you're doing now, is to turn down the lights in your home and or put on blue blocking glasses, because this light that we're getting in our homes and from our devices, it's signaling to us that it is morning, it's time to get up and be active. And that is not what you want to, the physiological state that you want to be in. And basically, if you can hold your hand out at arm's distance and see your fingers wiggling, that's enough light to suppress your melatonin somewhat. It's a very sensitive system.
Right. Note to self, hit Amazon as soon as we're done. Order 3 pairs of blue light blocking for me and my twins, because the kids are on their screens quite a lot in the evening. Even homework's done on screens now. So, and I think that that's important. I think we all know it, but rarely do we actually deploy it in our lives. And that's really tangible, something that's easy to do. And I'd love, obviously, Catherine, you work with so many people in this field. And what do you advise? Because, we've talked about the implications of a lack of sleep and how it ends up that we're not sleeping enough. But what are the things that you typically find help people to start moving from that 5-6 hours into truly having 7 to 8+ hours of night of restorative sleep?
I think about sleep really as a skill that we don't learn. We're not taught sleep skills in school. It's not typically part of even a health class in high school. And so I have a whole series of courses that are specific for unique populations, because different populations need different skills. I've got one for women, I've got one for law enforcement, one for shift workers. There's a variety of populations that I have these courses that really start with some of the basics, the sleep physiology and what we're getting from it. How are we benefiting from non-REM sleep versus REM sleep, what's happening in our brain, and then the circadian rhythms, the light, the darkness, those kinds of strategies, and then build your sleep skills over the course.
And what are the foundations? That's just, if somebody said to you, what are the top 3 things things that if I want a better night's sleep tonight, I should be doing right now, irrespective of what population I'm in. It's just like the core foundations of being human and having bodies that probably that I think haven't evolved pretty much since caveman times, right? Like I love how you mentioned earlier about, turning off screens, lowering lights. And I think, yeah, that makes so much sense. Are there other things that it's just like, this is mandatory?
Yes. So I think about it as having a sleep healthy lifestyle, and it starts in the morning to get 20 minutes of bright outdoor light within the first hour or two of waking, getting light bursts throughout the day outside. We just cannot get sufficient lighting indoors, or it's very, very difficult to get sufficient lighting indoors. So getting light during the day, and then the 3 hours before bed, turning down the lights, doing a practice where you purposely process your thoughts enough that if they come up in the night, you can push them aside and say, now it's not the time. It's limit setting, it's self-care. Now's not the time on those thoughts. And the other thing that really helps us strengthen our circadian system so that we can sleep well is to have a regular meal times. Actually, that helps synchronize our circadian system so that we can be widely awake during the day and deeply asleep at night. I have a free download that I'd love to give a link to your listeners, and they can get started on making a sleep healthy lifestyle.
Well, that's so smart. And, when you talk about having regular meal times, does this mean we shouldn't be eating late in the evening, just out of interest?
Absolutely, absolutely. Right now, intermittent fasting is pretty popular conversation. And if you're going to do intermittent fasting, you want to start with breakfast and then, have an earlier dinner and not eat later in the evening. Eating later in the evening, what it does is it pushes your body clock later. So you're not sleepy until later and want to sleep in later in the morning too.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And it's just making me think I need to completely overhaul the current way that I'm structuring my days. And it makes me think as well that that's exactly what I used to do. And it's so common that we fall out of good practices, that actually we're doing all the right things and then something happens or life changes and suddenly we've shifted without even realizing it. And this is a really valuable moment for me, for anyone listening, to get back to some of those practices, those morning walks, that getting, those earlier meal times in and coming off our screens earlier. And I'm curious as well. I mean, you must see this all the time. There seems to be a lot of myths about sleep and, a lot of trends that, people are talking about on TikTok, and they're like, oh, this is what you need to do, that you as an expert with so much experience must look at this stuff and go like, oh my goodness, this is so wrong. Is there anything at the moment that people are getting a little bit interested in that for you is just so off track?
Well, yes, I just did have a YouTube channel, and I did a video on polyphasic sleep. Have you heard about that?
No, I have not.
It's Yeah, so polyphasic means multiple, right? So three or more sleep periods. And what people are trying out is taking 5 or 6 hour-and-a-half naps throughout the 24-hour period. And that is not a good idea. One of the things that happens that's very restorative for our physical body during sleep, particularly non-REM sleep, is that our systems slow down, our blood pressure decreases, our heart rate decreases, our respiratory rate decreases, and it really allows our body to physically get restored and rest. And when you're doing multiple short naps, you don't have, a nice solid block of hours and hours where you're in this decreased activity and let your organs rest. So that's one. And then the other one that I'm noticing is the Sleepy Girl mocktail, which is tart cherry juice, magnesium, and some kind of bubbly water. Um, the amount of melatonin in tart cherry juice is quite small, and so that's just a kind of a funny idea.
I mean, you made me think there actually. You mentioned melatonin earlier and you just mentioned magnesium. And my brain's going, yeah, they're supplements that can really help a good night's sleep. Are there things that you would recommend?
There are things that I would recommend. One of the concerns about melatonin is that, as I mentioned, the light environment that we are in is quite different from what human beings have been in most of human history, and that light suppresses our melatonin. Melatonin has a role not only for sleep, but for our overall health. And it's a very powerful antioxidant. It's an anti-inflammatory. It helps with our bone strength. It helps with our heart. It helps with mitochondria. You may hear about mitochondrial health and relation to our energy. So I have been thinking about, if we are chronically suppressing our melatonin, what are the health effects? And lately, I'm 54, and lately many people have been saying, "Oh, you look so young for your age." And I think that it's in part because I've been sleeping so much, as much as I need to in my life. And now there's the cumulative effects on my skin because of, getting adequate natural levels of melatonin. I really encourage people, if you are sleep deprived, to take 10 days to have a sleep healthy lifestyle where you've scheduled enough time for sleep, you're getting the light in the morning and those other pieces of the routine that we talked about. Do that for a solid 10 days and then see how you feel and do it as an experiment. My guess is that you're going to feel better and more energetic and sharper thinking, and relationships are going to be smoother and all of that. But, do an experiment, try it for 10 days and see what you find.
I love that. And as we come to the end of every episode, I always invite my guests to share a piece of inspired action, which is something that people are going to come off this show, I hope, going, I need to do this. I want to take some action now, because if I forget about it and move on with my day and move into tomorrow, I'm probably not going to do anything at all. And when we're feeling inspired and energized about some new information, it's just the right time to do something now. And you've given us so many tips and so much potential next steps. But if somebody wanted to come off this podcast episode right now and say, like, I'm going to do something, what's the one thing that will start to get them on the right track?
I would absolutely, in your phone, set a timer for 2 or 3 hours before bed. And at that time, turn down the lights and put on blue blocker glasses. If you don't have a pair of blue blocker glasses, what you want to get is some that have a very strong orangish red colored to the lens.
Well, that is crystal clear. Thank you, Catherine. I think that's something we can all do. Now, if somebody wants to know a bit more about your work, where is the best place to find you?
So my courses are at skilledsleeper.com, and then I'm on social media in a lot of formats, short form, Instagram, TikTok, longer form, Substack for my newsletter, and YouTube videos every week. They're all at Skilled Sleeper.
And you mentioned a free download. We're going to put the link for that in the show notes if anybody wants to get into getting their sleep improved in more detail. Catherine, thank you so much for joining us today.
It was really a pleasure to be here. I hope that everyone does feel inspired and takes one step towards better sleep.
My thanks to Catherine for sharing so much valuable insight about sleep. I know that this is a topic that I'm going to be thinking a lot more about and starting to evoke some of the practices that Catherine shared with us today, because we just cannot underestimate how important this is. So if you've enjoyed and appreciated this episode, I'd love to invite you to subscribe on your favorite podcast app and to give us a 5-star review if you're a user of Apple Podcasts, as this is how we get our message out there to more like-minded souls who would appreciate and benefit from the value we share here on Goals with Soul. And so have an inspired action week. Take care. Bye now.